90% of this video is going to be about the follow me tool. Now it's kind of similar to the push-pull tool, except you can do some pretty fun things with it, especially around some funky and odd shaped geometries. I'll also briefly be talking about the scale tool and going over some interesting modifier and keyboard input that you can apply to the move tool. To get started, I'm going to just draw a rectangle, and then I'll also draw a circle. Yours doesn't need to look exactly like mine, just make it kind of similar. And I'll also draw a polygon. Now I want a three-sided polygon, so if your polygon looks something like that, all you need to do is type 3S and hit enter, and you'll see your icon change. And we'll place this one down about like that. So the next thing I'm going to do is erase these. Now the eraser tool is one of the few that I actually click and drag as opposed to click, release, click. So if you see me dragging with the eraser tool, that is why. So let's see, let's all take a look at this in an isometric view, and I'll go ahead and push pull. Now to start, I'm going to use this corner. So if you've got a right angle corner, it'll be a little bit easier to draw these first geometries. And I'll grab the rectangle tool, zoom in, and be very careful that I'm actually drawing on that face. You can, depending on your angle, sometimes do stuff like that. Just make sure you don't have it kind of floating off on the side. I actually want that shape on that face. So let's take a look at the push-pull tool first. It does what you'd expect. You click to start your push-pull, and you can push-pull that perpendicular to the face. Now, here's a situation where you get that little red symbol saying you can't go any further, and it is what it is. Let's hit escape on the keyboard, and this time I'm going to grab the follow me tool. Now, this is how you don't want to use it. You can use it this way, and there's a few situations where you might want to, but I definitely recommend not doing it this way. I've got the tool grabbed, and just like the push-pull tool, I will click to start. But this time, watch what happens. You can kind of follow this edge all the way around. And if you're really careful, you can go all the way around and complete this tool. But it can be tricky, and you might find yourself getting off on other angles that you don't want to. People have called this walking the dog. It's doable, but there's a much easier way, so I'm going to hit escape. I've talked about active select and pre-select. Active select is where you let the tool do the geometry selecting for you. Well, pre-selecting is just that. You determine the shapes ahead of time. So the follow me tool, it's a little bit different because it essentially has an operator and the tool is the function. So there's variables that you can plug into this. One of those variables happens to be a path. You need this. This profile needs a path in order to follow. So with the follow me tool, you can pre-select that. Now, you can either select an edge, hold down shift, and do an additive select. So each time I click, it adds to that selection. And if you accidentally click on a surface, well, you can click on it again. And you can go all the way around to pre-select your path that way. The only requirement is that it is, in fact, a path. If I were to select this path here, well, that kind of forks off, so that wouldn't work. But let me click in white space to deselect, because there is a little easier way to do this. And you can do that by selecting a face or surface. And the reason is a face or a surface is defined by an edge. It's built into the geometries. Any face or surface by default has an edge that defines it. So by pre-selecting this face, we are by default also pre-selecting the edge for the push-pull tool. Not all tools, but in this situation it works perfectly fine. So I've got my edge pre-selected. Then I will grab the the follow me tool, not the push-pull tool. Then I will click on that shape. And you can see what happened. Pretty neat. Let's hit undo because there's a couple other reasons you may want to do this. And this time I'll take the arc tool and I'll draw a very subtle arc. Again, you have to be kind of careful to make sure that you're staying on that face. Pre-select the path, grab the follow me tool, click on the profile. Let me go ahead and undo that again. And go ahead and try that with a few different shapes. The only requirement is that you have a profile and that you have a path. Pre-select the path, grab the follow me tool, click on the profile. Now you can also continue to add to the shape. I'll draw just a small angle up there. Maybe this is some sort of bench. Grab the path, grab the follow me tool, click on the shape. Now what's kind of neat about this, I'm going to undo that last one and erase that. You don't need to do a subtractive method. We are subtracting from this shape by the methods we are currently doing. But if you draw, for example, I'm going to grab the line tool, and I like to refer to this as some surgical line tool drawing. I'm going to click on that corner just so I can draw in the green direction, and then I'll draw in the blue, back in the green, back in the blue, just so I can kind of create this little floating face off to the side, and then I will erase that. Now, I'll go ahead and use my circle tool to find the center of that, and then I will erase. Now the whole point of doing that is that I have some geometries that are not connected to this shape, but the same steps apply. Pre-select the path, grab the follow me tool, click on your profile. So lots of very kind of interesting shapes you can make with this. You've got to be careful. Sometimes you run into this, where if you've got some weird angles, you may get some strange results. There's a few ways to avoid that. One is change where your profile is starting from. The other is you may need to go in there and draw a couple extra small geometries to change the path. But for the most part, just experiment with it and you'll find some pretty interesting uses for it. Now there's also a very, very simple and practical use of the follow me tool. So I'll start by deleting those geometries. I'll grab the circle tool and I'm going to draw a circle right at the intersection of my axes points. Now this is going to be essentially a lathe. If you've done any kind of woodworking, a lathe is the type of machine that grinds away a piece of wood and to create like bats, for example. You just spin it around. So a very common function in a lot of 3D modeling applications is a lathe, and they even call it a lathe, but SketchUp doesn't have that. Now, before I start drawing, I'm going to change my view to one of the side views here, and I can kind of see that circle right there, but the reason I wanted to change to this view is so I can draw on this axis. Also notice that my icon has changed. It's now a red circle instead of a blue circle, but I'm going to snap to that center, draw a circle, and if I orbit, I can see I've got something like this. So what do you think will happen if we pre-select that path, grab the follow me tool, and then click on this profile? Well, one way to find out, it just spins it around, and a very interesting and easy way to create a sphere. Let's take a look at the hidden geometry. So if you want to know how to create a sphere in SketchUp, that's all there is to it. Let's hit undo a couple times. Actually, I won't undo twice because I want to briefly visit the scale tool. I'm going to pre-select that inside circle, grab the scale tool, and I'll just kind of make this a little oval shape like that. Same steps. You'll get used to this pretty quick. Pre-select the path, grab the follow me tool, click on your profile. Now if you do that in the wrong order, you'll notice pretty quickly. If I select that first, grab the tool, click on the shape. Whoops, I actually did that in the right order. The wrong order would be that shape first, then the tool, then that. Yeah, you get some maybe some happy accidents, maybe something completely confusing. So to continue with this, I'm going to draw some helper geometries here on my oval, pre-select that top part, then grab the scale tool once again, and I just want to do this to make more of an egg shape. I'll erase that helper geometry, grab the path, grab the tool, grab the profile. So lots and lots of ways you can use this to create some very interesting and potentially helpful shapes. And this, incidentally, works really well for vegetation. If you just want a very, very basic representation of a different type of vegetation, such as trees, well, you can use this to, create canopies that are shaped like this, or more spherical, or flatter, or conical. Take your pick. It's really up to your imagination. Now, let me hit undo a few times. So I've just got my circle that I initially drew. Most 3D modeling applications have an exercise where you draw a goblet. I don't know why. It's just kind of the one thing all drawing tools seem to have an exercise for. SketchUp, no exception. And I'll grab the pencil tool, draw a line from the center up, and I'll infer in the green direction, and I want this to line up directly above this point, so I need to encourage that point just by hovering. Move my mouse, and I should be able to snap to a point that is in the green direction and directly above that point below. Whoops. There we go. Click there, and I've got to click one more line to create that face. And all you need to do this goblet exercise is to essentially draw the profile of that goblet on this surface. Maybe I'll make that a little bit angled and have a base like that. Just make sure that you're staying on that plane and not accidentally doing something like that. If that happens, you'll just want to undo or erase. Now, I'll go ahead and add just a little nick in here just so we can see this effect. Erase the unnecessary geometries, and path, tool, profile, there you go. If I turn off my hidden geometry, see what that looks like. So one more basic example that I'd like you to know with the push-pull tool, and a little bit more practical, is roof lines. If you've got a roof structure, and maybe it looks something like that. Yeah, there we go. And I'll go ahead and erase those extra geometries. Oops, too much. And maybe this roof looks something like this in profile. I'm going to encourage a point from right there, move my mouse up, click once more. So there's the profile of my roof. Well, the profile would actually be double that, but imagine if we were to push-pull this along this shape. Grab that, grab the follow me tool, grab the profile, and we get something like this. So there's a little bit of cleanup to do. It's not too bad. Go ahead and select all of those geometries. We've done this once before. Right click, go to intersect faces, and select with selection. Now it's just a matter of grabbing your eraser tool and very carefully coming in here. And if you see something like that, you've erased something that you actually need. Oops, which I did over here too. Now here's a situation where we may need to heal the surface just by retracing over a surface that should be there. And I can see I need to do that over here as well. I need to trace on that top part. And fairly quickly, you can get some very interesting roof lines. And just pass this off to your contractor, and I'm sure he'll be happy to give you a bid. Now, the reason this flattened out over here is because that part of the roof is wider than the one I started on. And if you wanted to try that, so you don't have that kind of flattened off part, you would just go ahead, draw that same shape, on the wider part and repeat the steps. So, if you're curious, try something like this. Grab your arc tool and draw an arc, erase the extra geometries, path, follow me tool, profile. Clean it up, and you've got yourself a pretty interesting looking roof line. So there's one more little drawing exercise with the follow me tool that I would like to do. And I'm going to start by just drawing a block about like this. And we'll make this a table. So with the rectangle tool, that will be the profile that I subtract from this table. And I'll select the top of this for my path, grab the follow me tool, click on the profile. Simple enough. But we'll take this a little bit further, and I'd like to revisit the scale tool, and we'll draw an arc to do that. Now I'm also going to look at the move tool. There's one little precision move trick here that would be very handy. I want to draw an arc on this side, but with the arc tool, it's really hard to center it, from the get-go, just the way it's drawn. So if I draw this arc like that, and I want it to be centered on this face, well, you just can't do it from the start. I'll show you one way to move this into position, which in itself is a little tricky, and I'll show you an easier way to do it altogether. So to move this, you would need to do a pre-select move. Now, you could grab the move tool and do an active select. For this type of thing, you might need to do a pre-select. Grab the select tool, click on that shape, and then grab the move tool. So you're probably getting the idea now why I really like this click, release, click method as opposed to the click and drag, because you'll find yourself using all kinds of modifier keys to do these things, and that's really the best way to use SketchUp. So by pre-selecting, I can snap to that bottom midpoint. I want to move that midpoint, or even the top of this. That top edge would be another control point I could grab, but I'll grab it right here to start the move. And I can, because of the geometries, the way this is locking, I can only go in the red direction. So now you might think, oh, that's easy. Let's just snap to this midpoint up here. But you're not getting the midpoint. I don't know if this is a bug or not, but for whatever reason, you won't get that midpoint snap unless you also manually lock this in the red direction, which happens to be the direction we're moving it. How do you do that? It's the right arrow on your keyboard. So if I tap my right arrow, now I'm locking that in that direction. And if I hover my cursor up here now, look what happens. I can, in fact, find and snap to that midpoint, which is interestingly not centered. But that one is. Oh, yeah, I know why. So take a look at that midpoint. Take a look at my arc. It's not centered. I'll show you why in a moment. Instead, I'll just snap to the midpoint on this top part here. And if I grab my select tool, I'll click in white space to deselect, move down here. Okay, I don't see any extra geometries, but watch what happens if I click on this shape. See that arc, or that edge, actually ends right here, interestingly enough. And there's two separate lines. This is a common little, it's not necessarily a bug, but an issue you may run into. If you don't like that, here's how you fix it. Grab the line tool, snap to the end of that line, and then just draw a small geometry like that. Then erase that geometry that you just drew. Now that line is one long solid one. So if you're a perfectionist like me and you don't want those extra geometries, go ahead and do that. All right, back to our arc tool. Now this is in fact centered, not necessarily the arc tool, but drawing arcs. Here's another way to center it. Grab your circle tool, and this, because it's drawn from the center, you can snap to an endpoint or a midpoint like this, draw, and click. And then it's just a matter of erasing that extra geometry. So a very common convention in SketchUp is, doing 3 steps and then going 2 steps backward to eventually get what you want. And, there's a common situation where it's more steps, but arguably easier than that first arc drawing method that I did. All right, on to the scale tool, which is this guy right here. We'll be looking at this in more detail. As with any of the tools, you can active select or pre-select. I prefer to pre-select. I almost exclusively pre-select the geometries with the scale tool. So I'll grab the select tool, click on the geometries, then click on the shape. And you'll see these control handles. If you hover over any one of those, you'll get a pop-up telling you what that will do. Now, if you look down below, you'll also see some modifier keys. So if you wanted to scale this about center, just look down there, you'll see the correct modifier key that will allow you to do that. And you will get the visual feedback on your SketchUp display to tell you what's going on. But I very simply just want to scale this up like that. And I'll do the same thing over here. Now, I don't want these to be the same height, so just make sure that they're off a little bit. I'm looking at the top of this arc and the top of that arc. It'll be a little bit easier if they're not the same height for this next step. Now, if I did want this to be scaled so it's closer to the edges, I probably would want to use that modifier key. So I'll start here. I haven't clicked yet. I'm holding down the correct modifier key. Now I can click and drag or click, release, click. There we go. You'll want to get in the habit of clicking in white space a lot too. All right, so we're going to push pull these through. Nothing too spectacular, but click to start, snap to that back corner, and we're going to really create kind of a barrel vault or barrel arch below this. We have a problem here. If you try to push pull that through, you'll get that red pop-up saying you're limited to the offset. So I'm going to hit escape. Okay, we've got a couple options. We can use the modifier key to create a new starting face. On the Mac, it is Option, and I could snap all the way through and snap it to this point, which might be your first inclination, but don't do that, because if I do that and I orbit around, I can see that it looks a little bit weird, and sometimes this face will cancel out. That time it did not, but just trust me, this is the way I want to do it, and I'm going to undo that. So I'll once again hit the modifier key, push pull this, but I'm intentionally going to blow it all the way past. Just make sure you're going through that shape to get something like this. So here's another example of a few steps forward and a few steps backward to get a desired result. So with that, looking something like that, go ahead and select all of the geometries, right click, and once again we will intersect with selection. An easy way to clean this up is to use bounding boxes with the select tool. So remember, a selection box is dragging from left to right, bounding box is dragging from right to left. So I will draw a bounding box here, hit delete on my keyboard, draw a bounding box here, hit delete, orbit, bounding box, delete. And we've got ourselves a fairly detailed, interesting intersection of arcs below this table. Now, for now, we haven't gotten into materials yet. The default materials in SketchUp are essentially a front side and a back side. If it kind of bothers you that they are a different color, easy way to fix is to right-click and select Reverse Faces. And I will be getting into much more detail with materials in a later video. But if you want everything to be looking the same color, you can do that. Or you can click up here on your Styles toolbar, Face Styles, and just set it all to white. All right, so this is actually kind of looking like a pool table, so that's what we'll be turning it into. The next few steps, I'll use the Offset tool, and we won't make this too detailed. I'll just offset that top surface, which will be the bumper areas of the pool table. Then I'll take the Circle tool, and I'll just draw only one of the pockets. Now that might be a little bit too big. Not a whole lot better, but that will do. So we could draw that carefully all the way around, making sure it's the same size, but I'd like to show you some move and copy tricks. I will be going into more detail with the move tool, but it's worthwhile just playing with a little bit right now. And I'm definitely going to pre-select all the parts of that circle. I'll hold down Shift, click, and click to get both of those selected. And then I will grab the move tool. Now here's a precision move. So it's whenever I talk about a precision move, I want you to move from a specific point to a specific point. I could pick just an arbitrary starting point and an arbitrary ending point, but not in this example. So pre-selected, grab the move tool, and I will snap to that point. Click to start the move. Whoops, and I'm forgetting a very important step here, but I'm glad I did this because you can do this before or after you start the move. Take a look in the lower left-hand corner of your screen and look for the modifier key that creates a copy. On the Mac, it's Option. On Windows, I'm pretty sure it's Control. So I've started my move, and that is a toggle. So all you need to do is tap it. There we go. Now I am making a copy. Kind of a neat thing you can do before or after you start the move. And I want you to click on this corner over here. So all right, we've got two pockets of our pool table. Once again, I'm going to grab the select tool, click in white space to deselect, and very carefully I will hold down Shift and select the parts that make up both of these. Don't worry about that the geometries look a little different between the two. So here's making a move and a copy at the same time. Once again, grab the move tool. This time I will hit the modifier key before I start the move. And it's a precision move, so I will move from here to here. Click to position. Okay, I can't stress this enough. Very important. Before you do anything else, you can do arrays and divisions on your move. Here's what that means. If you type 2 divided by and hit enter, it creates a copy. So you've got 2 gaps between your move. If you do 3 divided and enter, you can do 5 divide. You can do any number you want, but a pool table, that at least the ones I know of, look like that. So hit 2 divide and hit enter. You can also do this. Let me zoom out. You can zoom, but you can't do anything else, really. You can navigate, but don't grab another tool. If I do 2x and hit enter, it does a copy. So it's copying that based off of the same distance. If I do 10x, it makes 10 copies in that same direction. Pretty cool, huh? But we want 2 divided and hit enter. So that being said, let's now clean this up a little bit. Oops, I don't want to erase quite that one. I'll revisit the copying and arraying a little bit more because there's more things you can do. But I'm pretty sure we're going to run into an issue here, and I definitely want you to be able to identify and deal with these issues as you encounter them. So to continue drawing this pool table, we would need to push-pull that surface down, right? So if I grab my push-pull tool, well, that time it actually worked. I did this exercise before, and it was showing up as one solid surface. And if yours happens to be doing that, your active select is indicating that the whole top surface is being selected. Here's an easy fix. Mine is not, but it doesn't hurt to do this anyway. Select all of the geometries and do a quick intersect with selection. Sometimes that helps. Now, I don't have any in this example, but if you do, if you run into it, that is an easy way to fix it. All right, push-pull tool. I will push-pull that down, and then if I double-click on each one of these circles, because the double-click is the memory invoking function, I can push-pull all those pockets down, and if I double-click again, it just repeats that same amount. And I'm just using my mouse to zoom in and out. Now, we'll definitely be getting more into materials later on, but if you're getting a little antsy at looking at something other than these 2 or 3 colors in SketchUp, click on the Paint Bucket tool. Now, the Mac version looks a little bit different. You don't have crayons on Windows, but you will see a list of colors. You should be able to click on them and then click in your model. So go ahead and play around with that. We will be dealing with materials later on, but never hurts to start learning what they're about. And as with everything else, you can active select or you can pre-select. So there you go. Make yourself a pool table.